They made me serve their table after firing me, then I revealed who really owns this restaurant. What if the waitress who served you your lunch just became the owner of the restaurant you thought you were in charge of? Alexis Wilson was the heartbeat of Baker's Grill, a mid-tier restaurant in the pulsing heart of a city that never slept. At 32, she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who'd clawed her way through life's hardships. Her dark hair was always pulled into a neat bun, her brown eyes sharp with a mix of warmth and unyielding resolve. She'd started at the restaurant at 16, her hands raw from scrubbing pots in the steamy back kitchen, her dreams bigger than the greasy dishwasher. Over the years, she'd risen to head waitress, not through charm or shortcuts, but through relentless grit. Customers loved her. She remembered their names, their stories, like how Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher, liked his coffee with exactly 2 sugars, or how Mrs. Garcia, a nurse, preferred her salad dressing on the side. To them, Alexis wasn't just a waitress, she was family, a beacon of kindness in a world that often felt cold. But Alexis's ambitions stretched far beyond the dining room. She dreamed of owning her own diner, a cozy haven where people could escape the city's chaos, where the staff was treated like partners, not pawns. Every tip she earned, every extra shift she worked, went into a savings account labeled Dream Diner. At night, after grueling shifts, she'd sit in her cramped apartment, poring over books on restaurant management, finance, and real estate. Her desk glittered with sticky notes and highlighted pages. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a visionary, quietly building her empire while balancing plates of burgers and fries. Her life had been a series of battles. Raised by a single mother, Carla, who worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, Alexis learned early that nothing came without sacrifice. Carla's mantra, "You earn your place in this world," echoed in her mind every time she faced a challenge. It had carried her through years of late nights, rude customers, and the constant grind of restaurant life. But it also fueled her ambition, a fire that burned brighter with every setback. She'd lost her mother 3 years ago to cancer, a loss that left a hole in her heart but strengthened her resolve. Every step she took was for Carla, for the dream they'd shared over countless late-night talks at their kitchen table. Sam Baker, the owner of Baker's Grill, was a man who wore his wealth like a crown. At 50, with slicked-back hair and a wardrobe of tailored suits, he strutted through the restaurant like a king surveying his kingdom. He'd inherited the place from his father, Henry Baker, a man who'd built it with sweat and hard qualities Sam lacked entirely. To him, Baker's Grill was a cash machine, a stepping stone to his so-called restaurant empire. He rarely spoke to the staff, except to bark orders or complain about minor details: a smudged glass, an overcooked steak, a server who didn't smile enough. His arrogance was matched only by his greed, and he saw no value in the people who kept his business running. To Sam, loyalty was a one-way street, and he was always the one receiving. Jessica Miller, the restaurant manager, was Sam's perfect accomplice. In her early 40s, with a sharp bob haircut and a smile that never reached her eyes, Jessica thrived on control. She was the kind of manager who'd dock your pay for being a minute late, but claim credit for your ideas. Her efficiency was ruthless, her loyalty reserved for Sam and their shared ambition. To her, the staff were cogs in a machine, easily replaced and barely worth noticing. Alexis, with her competence and customer loyalty, was a particular thorn in Jessica's side. She saw Alexis's dedication as a challenge to her authority, a threat to her carefully curated image as the indispensable manager. Together, Sam and Jessica ran Baker's Grill like a dictatorship, squeezing every cent out of it while ignoring the human cost. The rest of the staff were a tight-knit group, each with their own struggles and dreams. Maria, the line cook, was a single mother who worked tirelessly to support her two kids. Jamal, the busboy, was a college student saving for tuition. They looked to Alexis as a leader, not just because of her experience, but because of her heart. She was the one who'd bring coffee to the late-night crew, who'd cover shifts when someone was sick, who'd listen when the weight of the job got too heavy to them. She was more than a coworker, she was their anchor. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the lunch rush fading into a lull, when Alexis was called into Sam's office. She wiped her hands on her apron, expecting a routine discussion about schedules or inventory. Instead, she found Sam lounging in his leather chair, scrolling through his phone, while Jessica stood beside him, clipboard in hand, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Alexis," Sam said, not bothering to look up, "we're letting you go." Effective immediately. The words hit like a freight train. Alexis's breath caught, her mind scrambling to make sense of them. "What? Why?" Jessica stepped in, her voice cold and practiced. "The restaurant needs a fresh look. Younger staff, new energy. You've been great, but we're moving in a different direction." Alexis's heart pounded, her hands clenching at her sides. "A fresh look? I've given 10 years to this place. I started as a dishwasher, worked every shift you asked, made customers love this place. I've trained half the staff here, and this is what I get." Sam finally looked up, his expression bored. "It's business, Alexis, don't take it personally." But it was personal. It was personal when Jessica handed her a termination letter with no severance, no real explanation beyond restructuring. It was personal when Sam waved her off, already turning back to his phone. It was personal when they didn't even bother to thank her for a decade of loyalty. And it was deeply personal when, just 2 hours later, Jessica called her back to work the dinner shift because they were short-staffed and needed her to serve a VIP table. Alexis stood in the break room, her termination letter crumpled in her fist, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She thought of her mother, who'd worked through worse humiliations to provide for her. She thought of the dream diner, the savings she'd scraped together, the future she'd fought for. She wanted to scream, to throw the letter in their faces, and walk out. But she needed the money, needed every last tip to keep her dream alive. Swallowing her pride, Alexis smoothed her apron, forced a smile, and walked out to the dining room, her heart a battlefield of anger and resolve. The dining room buzzed with the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation. Alexis approached the VIP table, her tray steady despite the storm raging inside her. There, seated like royalty, were Sam Baker, Jessica Miller, and 2 men in expensive suits, investors, no doubt, here to fuel Sam's delusions of grandeur. Alexis recognized the type, men who saw dollar signs where she saw people, who cared more about profits than the lives they disrupted. She served their drinks with the professionalism she'd honed over years, her voice steady as she took their orders. But every word from Sam's mouth felt like a knife twisting in her gut. He laughed too loudly, his hands gesturing as he boasted about streamlining operations and cutting dead weight. Jessica chimed in, her eyes flicking to Alexis, with a smugness that made her skin crawl. The investors nodded, impressed, as Sam painted a picture of a thriving empire built on their backs. Then came the comment that changed everything. As Alexis refilled their water glasses, Sam leaned back and said, "My investments are solid. This place is just the start. We're cutting costs, bringing in fresh faces, and the new owner's going to love what we're doing." Alexis froze, the pitcher hovering over the table. The new owner. She'd heard whispers that Baker's Grill had been sold, but Sam had never mentioned it. No one had. Her mind raced. piecing together fragments of conversations she'd overheard Sam's late-night meetings. Jessica's cryptic comments about big changes, the sudden push to refresh the staff. Something was off, and it wasn't just their betrayal. She kept her face neutral, serving their entrees with a smile that hid the gears turning in her head. But inside, she was seething. They'd fired her, humiliated her, and now they were boasting about their plans while she was forced to play servant. The dining room seemed to pulse with her anger, the chatter fading to a dull roar. She thought of her mother's words, "You earn your place." She'd earned hers, and they'd stolen it. And then Jessica pushed her over the edge as Alexis cleared a plate. Jessica turned to the investors with a laugh. "You see, we need people who can keep up with the pace around here. Some of our older staff, well, they just can't hack it anymore. Like Alexis here, she's been great, but it's time for new blood." The investors chuckled, and Sam smirked, but Alexis felt the words like a slap across the face. Her hands shook as she set the plate on her tray, her mind screaming with rage. The dining room seemed to close in, the lights too bright, the laughter too loud. She wanted to hurl the tray at them, to scream that she'd given everything to this place. But she didn't. She excused herself, her smile tight, and slipped into the kitchen, where she leaned against the wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps. In that moment, something shifted. Alexis wasn't just angry, she was done being their pawn. She'd spent years playing by their rules, but now she was ready to rewrite the game. She didn't know how yet, but she knew one thing: they'd regret crossing her. After the dinner rush, Alexis returned to the restaurant to clear out her locker. The dining room was quieter now, the last customers lingering over coffee and dessert. She moved quickly, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and determination. As she stuffed her apron into a bag, she heard footsteps behind her. "Alexis." A voice called, soft but firm. She turned to see a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and a sharp, kind gaze. "I'm Margaret Chen, the lawyer handling the restaurant's ownership transition." Alexis frowned, her hands pausing. "Ownership transition?" Margaret smiled, pulling a folder from her bag. "You're a hard woman to track down, Ms. Wilson. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. You're the majority shareholder of Baker's Grill. You own this place." The words hit like a thunderbolt. Alexis stared, her mouth dry, her mind struggling to process. "What are you talking about?" Margaret opened the folder, revealing documents stamped with official seals. "Over the past 3 years, you've been purchasing shares through an anonymous investment account. You reached majority ownership 2 months ago. Sam Baker doesn't know, nobody does, because you used a proxy. But this restaurant, it's yours." Alexis's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of a table, her mind reeling. She remembered the late nights researching investments, the careful steps she'd taken to buy shares through a broker, using every cent of her savings. It had started as a way to secure her future, to have a stake in the place she'd given her life to. She'd scraped together every tip, every bonus, pouring it into shares she bought anonymously, never imagining she'd end up with control. Majority owner. That was beyond her wildest dreams. She looked at the documents, her name clear as day. The numbers didn't lie. She owned 51% of Baker's Grill. Sam and Jessica had been running her restaurant, making decisions without her knowledge, firing her from her own business. The irony was almost too much. Margaret handed her a business card. "You'll want to review these with your own lawyer, but the paperwork is ironclad. You're in charge now." Alexis nodded, her mind racing. She thanked Margaret, tucked the documents under her arm, and stood there for a moment, letting the truth sink in. She thought of her mother, who taught her to fight for what she deserved. She thought of the years of sacrifice, the nights she'd gone to bed hungry to save en Vespa, the customers who'd become her family. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a victim. She was the owner, and it was time to take back what was hers. But first, she needed to be sure. She called her broker, a gruff but kind man named Eddie who'd helped her navigate the world of investments. Eddie, it's Alexis. I just met with a lawyer who says I'm the majority owner of Baker's Grill. Is that true? Eddie chuckled, his voice warm over the phone. True as the day is long, kid. You've been buying shares like I told you, and you hit 51% 2 months ago. You didn't want anyone knowing, so I kept it quiet. You own that place, Alexis. She thanked him, her hands trembling as she hung up. She looked at the documents again, her heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and power. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the owner, and she was going to make them pay. Alexis didn't hesitate. She straightened, her anger transforming into a razor-sharp focus. She marched back to the dining room, where Sam and Jessica were still at the VIP table, laughing over glasses of wine, oblivious to the storm approaching. The investors were nodding along, their faces flushed with the promise of profits. The dining room was alive with the hum of conversation, but as Alexis approached, a hush fell over the nearby tables, as if the room itself sensed the reckoning. Coming, she stopped at their table, her presence commanding silence. Sam looked up, annoyed, his eyes narrowing. What do you want, Alexis? You're done here. She smiled, a calm, dangerous smile that sent a chill through the air. Actually, Sam, I'm just getting started. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Alexis Wilson, the owner of Baker's Grill. The table erupted in laughter. Sam slapped his knee, and Jessica smirked, shaking her head. Nice try, sweetheart, Sam said, his voice dripping with condescension. Go clean out your locker. Alexis didn't flinch. She laid the documents on the table, the official seals gleaming under the restaurant's lights. These are the ownership papers. I've been buying shares for 3 years, and as of 2 months ago, I'm the majority shareholder. This restaurant, it's mine. The laughter died. Sam's face went pale, his eyes darting to the documents. Jessica snatched them up, her hands trembling as she scanned the pages, her smugness replaced by panic. The investors exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the shift in the room. The other staff members, lingering nearby, watched with wide eyes, their whispers spreading like wildfire. You're lying, Sam sputtered, his voice rising. This is my restaurant. My father built this place, not anymore, Alexis said, her voice steady as steel. You've been running my business, making decisions without my consent. You fired me from my own restaurant. And you know what? You're done here. Both of you. Sam's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica's face twisted in disbelief, her eyes darting between the documents and Alexis. This is a mistake, she stammered. You can't, I can. Alexis cut in, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. And I am. She turned to Mike, the security guard who'd worked at Baker's Grill for years. A man who'd always respected her. Mike, escort Mr. Baker and Ms. Miller out. They're no longer welcome here. The dining room went silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Mike stepped forward, his expression grim but resolute. Let's go, sir, he said to Sam, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sam tried to argue, his voice rising to a shout. You can't do this. I'll sue you. But Mike was firm, guiding him toward the door. Jessica followed, her face a mask of shock and humiliation, clutching the documents as if they'd somehow change. The investors scrambled to their feet, muttering apologies as they grabbed their coats and fled, their briefcases banging against the tables in their haste. The staff watched in stunned silence, some with tears in their eyes, others with quiet. Priety Maria, the line cook, gave Alexis a small nod, her eyes shining with respect. Jamal, the busboy, stood a little taller, as if he knew this was a moment they'd all remember. Alexis stood tall, her heart pounding with a mix of triumph and relief. The weight of years of sacrifice, of being overlooked and underestimated, lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the owner, and she was taking back her power. The next morning, Alexis called a staff meeting. The employees gathered in the dining room, their faces a mix of curiosity, apprehension, and hope. Word of the previous night's drama had spread like wildfire, and the air buzzed with questions. Alexis stood before them, no longer in her waitress uniform but in a simple blazer and jeans, her presence commanding respect. She held the ownership documents in her hand, a tangible reminder of her victory. "I know things have been tough," she began, her voice steady but warm, carrying the weight of someone who'd lived their struggles. "I've been where you are, scrubbing dishes, running plates, dealing with customers who treat you like you're nothing. I've felt invisible, taken for granted, pushed aside. But that ends today. This restaurant is ours now, yours and mine. We're going to make it a place where everyone is valued, where hard work is rewarded, and where customers feel like family." She announced raises for the staff, promotions for those who'd been loyal, like Maria, who'd stayed late to help clean, and Jamal, who'd never missed a shift. She introduced new policies, flexible schedules, paid sick leave, and a profit sharing program to give everyone a stake in the restaurant's success. She brought in a consultant to streamline operations, not to cut costs, but to make the restaurant more efficient and welcoming. And she renamed the place Wilson's Grill, a nod to her dream diner, her mother's strength, and her own resilience. But she didn't stop there. She shared her vision, a restaurant that wasn't just a business, but a community. She planned to introduce a scholarship fund for staff pursuing education, a mentorship program for young workers, and a weekly community night where locals could eat at a discount. She wanted Wilson's Grill to be a place where people didn't just come for food, but for connection, for hope. The staff rallied around her, their loyalty fierce. Maria hugged her, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "You did it, Alexis. You really did it." Jamal offered to help design the new menu, his eyes bright with ideas. The kitchen crew, usually quiet, erupted in cheers, their aprons stained but their spirits high. Customers noticed the change too. The food was better, the service warmer, the atmosphere alive with purpose. Alexis introduced new menu items, like her mother's meatloaf recipe, which became an instant hit. She redesigned the dining room, adding warm lighting, cozy booths, and photos of the staff on the walls, a reminder that they were the heart of the place. A year later, Alexis stood in the dining room of Wilson's Grill, watching as families laughed over plates of her mother's meatloaf. Couples shared desserts in the cozy booths, and regulars chatted with the staff like old friends. The restaurant was thriving, its success a testament to her vision and resilience. It wasn't just a business, it was a legacy, a place where people found connection and comfort. She thought of her mother, whose lessons had carried her through every challenge. "You earn your place in this world," Carla had said, and Alexis had done just that. She'd faced betrayal, humiliation, and doubt, but she turned it into triumph. She'd taken a restaurant that had been a symbol of her struggle and made it a symbol of her strength. But the journey wasn't over. Alexis had plans, bigger plans. She was scouting locations for a second Wilson's Grill, dreaming of a chain of diners that carried her mother's spirit. She'd started the scholarship fund, helping Jamal enroll in business school, and launched a community kitchen, serving free meals to those in need every Sunday. She'd even begun mentoring young women like herself, teaching them to invest, to dream, to fight for their place. As she locked up for the night, Alexis paused at the door, looking at the sign that read Wilson's Grill. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, a woman who'd fought for every inch of her dream. A tear slipped down her cheek, not of sadness, but of pride, of love, of gratitude for the journey. She thought of her mother's smile, her hands rough from work, but gentle in their guidance. This restaurant was more than a victory over Sam and Jessica. It was a promise kept, a dream realized, a legacy built. She turned off the lights, the dining room falling into a soft, warm darkness. Wilson's Grill wasn't just a restaurant. It was proof that no one could take away what you'd earned, not your pride, not your dream, not your place in the world. And as Alexis stepped into the cool night air, she knew this was only the beginning. Her mother's voice echoed in her heart, and she smiled, ready for whatever came next.